In this video, we're going to change the pads and the rotors for the two front wheels of this 2018 Honda CRV. I've done pads and rotors on 4 or 5 different types of cars. This is the first time I've done this car, and it needs pads pretty badly. I don't have much fancy equipment, but after we've broken loose the lug nuts, I use a bottle jack to get the car high enough and then put it on some car jacks. Then we can get the lug nuts off and take the wheel off. If you've never done this, there's only really 4 bolts involved. We use a 14mm to take off the first 2 bolts. And those are the bolts that hold the caliper onto the bracket assembly. And once those are out, the whole caliper should just slide right off the rotor. It'll be attached by the brake line, so you need to be gentle with it. And as those pads have worn out, that caliper has come out farther and farther. So we use a clamp and the old brake pad to slowly push the caliper back in. You'll see it slowly recede into the caliper there. I did this for years with just a C-clamp. You don't need these fancy devices I have here, but they are handy if you have one. And once that caliper is pushed back in, we can just hang that caliper up so the brake line doesn't get stressed. With a 19mm socket, we now need to take the bracket off. I had to use a longer pipe extension to make kind of a breaker bar. This is the first time this car has had a brake job, and it's got about 80,000 miles on it. But once you get them loose, it's pretty simple. 2 bolts, ratchet them out. And once you get those removed, the whole assembly comes with the pads, the bracket, the sliding pins, all comes as one piece. And all we need to do is service that a little bit, put new pads on it, and replace the rotors. So let's work on the rotors first. One new thing about this car is it had a screw that held the rotor on. I've never had a car that had that. And I tried a bunch of different ways with a screwdriver and channel locks and a socket setup with the largest Phillips bit I could find. That thing just was not budging. So it was a good opportunity to go Harbor Freight, get a new tool. And this impact screwdriver worked great. It took me 5 minutes of kind of figuring out how to use it, but then when you hit it just right, it breaks that screw loose. And then just with a few hits with the light sledgehammer, you could pull the rotor right off. You can get these rotors resurfaced if you want to save some money, but I find it's easier just to buy new ones off Amazon. I cleaned up that surface a little bit to remove any rust. Then we get out the new rotor, use some brake cleaner to clean off all the grease that comes on it from the factory. And reinstall that rotor with that screw in the right place. And that's it for new rotors. Simple job. Let's get to replacing the pads. First, I like to get out all the new parts and lay them beside the old parts so I know exactly where they go. One of the brake pads has a clip on it. You need to make sure that you have the matching clip. And another new thing for me, these spring clips attach to the pads and spring the pad away from the rotor. I had never seen those before. That's a new one to me. But once we have the pads prepped, next thing we're going to do is just inspect and grease these sliding pins. You pull them out of the rubber boot, wipe it off with a towel, If it looks good, you apply some new caliper grease and you pop it right back in. You want to make sure that's moving nice and smoothly. These pins slide as the caliper presses on the pads. These pins slide in and allow the pads to press against the rotor. So it's important that they move freely. Now within the bracket there's some clips. We're going to remove those clips and we're going to clean up the bracket a little bit, remove any rust that's there, and apply a little bit of caliper grease just to keep it from rusting in the future. Also use some brake cleaner here. And once the bracket's all cleaned and greased up, we can put the new clips in. There's only one way they can go, just have to figure it out. And then we're going to put that bracket back onto the car around the rotor. Those same 19mm bolts go in there. You want to get those nice and tight. I put a little grease on the edges of the pads as well to help them slide in those channels smoothly. The key is you just don't want any grease to get on the surface of the pads, and you want to use as little grease as possible in this whole area. Because of these new butterfly clips, I temporarily clamped the pads so they wouldn't spring back out, and then you just work the caliper back onto the bracket and around the pads. And once you have it all lined up, you put those 14mm bolts back in. And that's really the whole process. I'll put the wheel back on to close it out. But if you note, I never opened the brake line, so there's no need to put in any new fluid. I usually do a brake fluid flush after I do a brake job, but I treat those as two separate jobs. First, I want to get rotors and pads on without opening the line. And then usually the next weekend or something, I'll do a flush of the line. So if we talk about time and money, because of that screw that was on the rotor, that was kind of unexpected. This took me about 3 hours to do the two front wheels. The parts were about $120 off Amazon. And the dealership was asking for $600 to do the front brakes. I also did the rear wheels. They're slightly different. They have an electronic brake that's involved, so it's a little more complicated, but pretty much the same procedure. In general, this is the same process I've used with all my cars for years, so this is a good skill to learn. It really pays off in the long run, and it's enjoyable when it goes smoothly. All right, hope that helps someone out. Thanks for watching.